pick your own vein and inject it without having an intravenous line at all. But it's very clearly explained in Dr. Murray's interview that Michael Jackson did not have good veins. In fact, his veins were so poor that Dr. Murray had to start this IV in a vein that was below his left knee. So to have to resort to a vein below the left knee suggests that there were no good veins that were accessible to Dr. Murray. So the possibility of a direct self-injection seems extremely unlikely, and also propofol stings. You would not want to inject this into, you would not want to try to inject it into a vein and miss, because that would actually be extremely painful.
And that's the reason why it's often diluted with lidocaine.
Correct.
And whichever route of administration, via directly into the vein or via infusion into an intravenous line, this scenario depicts self-injections, 6 injections each, 6 injections, 50 milligrams each.
Correct.
And the analysis would be the same.
Correct.
Okay. Now, in order for this to occur, then, repeated injections, as you previously indicated, the 50 milligrams would put him to sleep?
The 50 milligrams would be expected to put him to sleep for a period of time, and certainly leave him sufficiently sedated that he would not be able to grab a syringe and draw things out until the levels had come back down again. This scenario requires that he wake up after each injection in order to re-inject. So, looking at the brain levels, Michael Jackson will not be awake at a brain level of 3 micrograms per mil of propofol. He'll be asleep there.
And looking at the simulation, then you're talking about, for example, the first peak being approximately
Correct.
3 micrograms per milliliter?
Correct. So he self-injects here. And by the way, notice the difference time scale. It's important to point out, we've been looking at 10-minute time scales. Now for our self-injections, we're looking at an hour and a half.
Why is that?
It's because we need to have time to have these repeated injections. So we have an hour and a half to allow us to simulate 6 self-injections. And in each case, he gets up here to a level greater than 1.5 or 2, he's going to fall asleep. In fact, he gets up here to a level greater than the apnea threshold from Dr. White's work, and he may even be at risk of not breathing. And that would be the point at which he would then be in danger of subsequent cardiac arrest if his lungs run out of oxygen. But I've assumed that he did not arrest, and that, in fact, the blood levels went way up and came down quite quickly, but I'm having him wake up here when the blood level is about 0.5, because that's a reasonable blood level to expect him to be awake, and given that he's very dexterous, have the ability perhaps to draw drug out of a vial of propofol.
And so in this simulation, you're assuming that after each self-injection of 50 milligrams, there then is a period of time in which he needs to wake up so he's physically capable and awake to give the subsequent injection.
Correct. He can't give himself another injection if he's still asleep.
So, and again, that explains also why the timeline is so much lengthier in this simulation, because for each time that he is put down essentially with the propofol and the time to wake up to be able to give a new dose, it spreads out this scenario well past the 10 minutes.
Correct. The propofol is accumulating here. So here he's able to give himself the next injection at about 9 minutes, as I recall. Here it takes, this distance is about 10 minutes, and you can see this distance increases because the propofol is accumulating in his body. It's building up in the fat as he's doing this. It's not washing out as fast after each injection. So it takes longer. Each injection keeps him asleep for a longer period of time in this 90-minute simulation.
Going to this slide, again, the same simulation, but we now have noted on the slide these blue lines. What do those represent?
That's a 10-minute bracket. So that is the earliest at which his circulation would have stopped. Again, it's the absolute earliest, being a conservative estimate. So if he, and it starts, each one of these starts when the red line crosses the apnea threshold. So we'll say that the red line crosses the apnea threshold, and Michael Jackson stops breathing. And the blue lines show us a 10-minute delay until the circulation stopped. So, for example, here, at this one right here, he stops breathing here, and with this, and he never starts breathing again. When would circulation stop? The earliest would be here. And the point is that the blood level is quite low, well below what was measured in the femoral vein. And in fact, that exact same conclusion is seen in each one of these. In this very last injection, so now drug has been accumulating, but the requirement that he be awake in order to give himself a dose, the requirement that he be awake to give himself the dose, results in starting at a low level, going up, doesn't breathe here, he stops breathing. 10 minutes later, his heart stops. And even after 6 doses, the level that would be seen on autopsy is a small fraction of what was actually observed in the femoral vein.
But he does, in this scenario, the blood levels do reach and actually exceed the femoral vein levels.
At various points in time, that's correct. This level here, but that required that he be awake and re-inject here. So the level does go above the femoral vein level because he was awake enough to re-inject here. But he's also still alive because he's moving air, he's breathing. He's still alive here. The level goes up. He stops breathing here, in this case, and the level comes all the way down before circulation would come to a stop.
So in this scenario, because of the at least 10 minutes of circulation that would continue following apnea, this scenario did not happen.
Correct. For self-injection, the requirement that he be awake when he does the injection means you're always starting at a fairly low propofol concentration.
And let's go to one more scenario. Again, just taking it, let's assume it was 100 milligrams, self-injection, 100 milligrams each. And for purposes of this scenario, 6 injections. Now, this scenario requires a time frame of 3 hours?
Yes. It takes sufficiently long to wake up from this bigger dose of 100 milligrams. That's a full syringe. It takes sufficiently long to wake up that I had to extend the axis here out to 3 hours because of the time required for him to wake up to give himself the next dose.
Now, the blood levels in this scenario are much higher than, of course, than the 50 milligram self-injection.
Correct. They're literally twice as high.
And in this scenario, then, what would you expect to see with just a single dose?
So with just one dose, the blood level goes way up. He goes well past the brain level. Again, this is an anesthetic induction dose, or very close to it. So the brain level goes way above the apnea threshold, and he would stop breathing here. And in this particular case, I have him giving the next, this comes in sufficiently fast, I didn't put my little bracket here. But 10 minutes later, after this, the blood level is well below what was measured. And actually, that's the simulation we already did. We did a 100 milligram simulation. That's the same, that's exactly this curve right here. It's just been compressed. So now, once he gets down to this level of 0.5, to allow him to self-administer the next dose. And again, it's another blast, another anesthetic induction dose. And he might well stop breathing at this dose. But his heart wouldn't stop until here. And that is well below what was measured in the femoral vein. And even taking this out now for 6 consecutive doses, and I mean, you know, this is a notion of somebody who's putting himself unconscious, a general anesthetic dose, then waking up and drawing up drug, and which takes time, and re-injecting it. I mean, people just don't wake up from anesthesia like that. People just don't wake up, you know, hell-bent to grab the next dose in a syringe, draw it up, and shove it in their IV again. I mean, it's a crazy scenario. I've never seen anything. It just doesn't happen. But for the purposes of discussion, if that did happen.
Well, in fact, as you said in the earlier scenario, 100 milligram dose would be fatal anyways. Likely.
Likely.
And
likely. He likely would have died after the first one here or after the second one, but he would have died with a low blood level.
Right. And the blood level from 100 milligram single dose or 6 repeated doses in this scenario would not result in the blood levels found in the femoral blood at the time of autopsy.
That is correct. There are studies. I don't know if I should. There are studies that look at autopsies of propofol self-administration, and this is what they show: low blood levels.
Now, so then in this scenario, then, based on a single 100 milligram dose likely being fatal, you took this through, just for sake of demonstration, 6 repeated dosages of the same amount.
Correct. Somehow he survives each one and wakes up enough to give himself another dose. And the point here is that even with 6 of these, we still don't have a high enough femoral level. Even doing this 6 times in a row, the level that would be observed at the time that circulation stops is below what was found in the femoral vein.
Your Honor, this would be a good time if it's okay with the court.
Mr. Chernoff? Sure. Thank you. May I see counsel for just a moment? We are going to take the noon recess at this time. Please remember all of the admonishments, the written and the verbal admonishments. And we're going to take a little bit longer than usual lunch break today for the convenience of the jurors. So, everybody enjoy lunch. We're going to be recessed till 1:45 this afternoon. Thank you.